Welcome back to Conspeared, where skeptics and believers come together to discover the truth.
Why do you always do that?
Because I like to have fun with it.
If only you guys could see the face that he made. It's
It's
a
like,
little
surprise!
It's a little dramatic.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say.
Maybe just
Welcome back. Welcome back. It's been a while since I've been on here, but apparently there's been some independent podcasting going on while I've been gone.
It was your idea?
My idea?
Yeah.
No,
like,
you asked me if you should do it, and I was like, sure.
Alright. Did I say something?
Yeah, you were just like, should I do this? And I was like, yeah, go for it. I could use a laugh.
Well, I think I asked you, and then after you said yes, I asked everybody else if I should do it.
Yeah.
Everybody on Twitter.
Everybody loves a good drunk person ramble.
Yeah, I guess.
So it's good to be back. The last episode where I was with you guys was with the personal paranormal story day, which I was just saying before we started this one, I really enjoyed that one because it was like unscripted and I didn't have any notes to go by. I was literally just storytelling because they were
by the seat of your pants.
I love that though. I don't know. It was
fun. I will say that.
But for today's episode, we're getting a little back into the more scripted, rehearsed episodes.
Not really rehearsed. We don't rehearse.
Well, no, we don't rehearse it, but we've researched, taken notes,
yes, there you go. Research it.
In a sense, as I'm talking, I'm going by my notes and I'm sort of reading from my notes, and so in that sense, it's a little less candid.
Yes, exactly.
But before we get into today's episode, did you want to talk about some PR stuff?
Talking to a lot of podcasters out there. We do have we're going to pick a random 10 reviews on our iTunes when we hit 30, and we're going to give them a shout out on a few episodes. We are, we're about 2 weeks away from being, was it 3 months in? 3 months in.
Yeah, roughly.
From our first podcast, our first episode.
Release, the pilot.
Yeah. And it's funny, I was looking at our analytics, and we're at exactly 5,555 downloads.
Almost at that 6,000
yes.
mark. That's insane.
I think we can get it. I'm looking at it, I'm like, we have 2 weeks, and we usually get, about at least 100 downloads a day.
It's the most random time.
Average.
Someone was like, how do you get other countries to listen to you? I was like, I don't know. I think it's all about the topic choice.
I think it is too. As long as you talk about
relevant things or like popular things
things
on.
from all over the world.
Speaking of which, every week, when we're talking about what we should talk about, we're always kind of stuck. Well, like, does everyone know about that? Like, is that going to be a good choice? That kind of thing. And later down the road, we would like to venture into talking about things that are not as well known. Obviously, we both know of conspiracies and paranormal and true crime things that are not very well known. But we're thinking of later down the line, maybe introducing that more when we've got more of an audience that
when there's more subscribers.
Right, because I know, like I was saying, as a listener, I'm less likely to listen to something if I've never heard of it before. Unless I know the podcasters.
That's me as well. If I see something, I'm like, I've never heard of that in my life.
Right.
And then I just skip until I find something.
Right.
Unless it's somebody, a podcast that I know well.
Like Mile Higher podcast, it really doesn't matter what they post. I'm going to at least listen to it.
Right.
Even if I've never heard of it. But if I've never heard of the podcast or the podcasters, and it's a topic I've, never heard of before, I'm probably not going to listen, which is why we're sticking to more popular topics as of now. But later down the road, we're probably going to get into the more obscure and lesser known topics. So
we're up to 18 countries. I just now checked it out.
It's crazy.
The newest ones are, I believe we haven't mentioned, Spain, Sweden, Argentina, Germany, Thailand, and Russia.
Crazy. Do they have like translators? Like, I'm wondering.
A lot of different countries. A lot of countries you wouldn't believe this, but a lot of countries either just love to learn English so that they can expand, you know,
They don't need to be learning English from you.
Yeah, they would never learn it from me, seeing as how I cannot speak the English language.
Well, you can speak the English language, but your slang is kind of...
When you grow up using
West
it,
Virginian.
it's hard to get rid of it.
Yeah. Most people don't, like... You can hear a hint of my accent, but it's really not that.
A hint?
A hint.
Oh, a hint.
Yeah.
A hint of my accent. I always like, if y'all listen closely, y'all should have like a drinking game where every time you hear it, pronounce the G at the end of words.
Oh,
and every
whatever.
time I don't pronounce the G at the end of words, you have to take a drink. You'd be like, yeah, we went fishing the other day. And I'll say, yeah, we went fishing.
Whatever. So, today is episode 11. Can't believe it.
Episode 11.
Episode 11. So, without further ado, I say we just dive right into this. And I'm hoping, speaking of popular topics, I'm pretty sure this is a well-known topic. But if you have not heard of it, don't stop listening yet.
Yeah, because we may mention something that you haven't heard of.
Yeah, this is... well, no, I was saying, like, if someone, like, clicked on this to just kind of listen to it and they're like, oh, I've never heard of this, whatever, they need to listen to it anyway because this is bizarre. And it is pretty popular. Like, a lot of paranormal investigators have done shows on this. And from what I understand, in the paranormal world at least, it is a very popular topic. And that would be the Sallie House. Which is located in Atchinson, Kansas. It is arguably the most haunted house in the United States.
I'll argue that.
Arguably. So, yeah. So we figured we'd talk about this today. You may have heard about the Sallie House from, I know Ghost Adventures did one on it, Ghost Hunters, most recently BuzzFeed Unsolved, who we watch all the time.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of like us in a sense, because you got the one guy who's like scared of everything, aka me. And
Ryan,
Shane, Shane,
is
I
Shane?
think is, yeah.
Ryan is the one that's scared, and Shane is the skeptic.
Yeah, and he like makes fun of everything. But anyway, they did an episode on the Sallie House, and it was actually probably one of their more bizarre episodes, because even Shane was like, I don't know how that flashlight turned on, you know?
Yeah, but the guy just barely twisted the camera.
I know,
or the
but I'm just saying.
Flashlight on.
That's what really intrigued me about this, and we did a little bit of research, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Let's talk about this.
Let's talk about it. Okay. So, a little historical background. This is just a typical, your average, like, house. I mean, it's an older looking house. Renovations have been done to it, but ultimately, the outside of the house has looked the same since about 1857, which is when the original lot for the house was sold. Okay, so a little background on the house itself with its owners as well. So it was first sold on April 17th, 1857 to Samuel C. and Lucy Pomeroy. And I'm not going to go through all of these names because, like, there's literally a list of the whole house's history until 2004. Like, all the way from 1857.
How often, just give us an estimate of how often this house
sold?
is being switched out.
Okay, so...
You don't have to read the whole thing.
It's like every couple of years.
How many is every couple? Is it really two, or is it...
It's like 1857, 1859, it was sold. 1866, 1867, 1872, 1874...
wow, this house really...
It really has been gone... It's gone through a lot of owners. I have highlighted a few owners and a few dates that will be significant to this story.
Okay.
So, let's see. Going down to 1930...
None.
Well, actually, 1926, when a woman named Agnes Finney True moved in. And she actually died in the house in 1939 at midnight, and she had been ill for the last 3 years. So that's significant to the story.
Okay.
And then some other places. Okay, so in 1948,
Wait, when did she move in the house?
1926.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just kind of figuring out something.
Okay.
Don't mind me.
But in 1948, a man named Dick Mize and his family moved into the house, and they only lived there for a short time. And one of their children is named. Oh, I'm sorry, that's irrelevant. I thought that was something else. It's irrelevant. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, so in 1958, there was a mysterious fire in the house, and they could never find a cause of it. That was when a woman named Ethel Anderson was living there. No significant damage was done to the house, but it was just a fire that happened, and no one really knew how or why it was caused. 1958.
58? Okay. Somebody fell asleep with a cigarette in their mouth.
So in 1990, Bobby and Colleen Humbird moved into the house, and they had a daughter named Heather. And Heather played with an imaginary friend named Sallie in this house. And later on, this will become significant, as you can imagine. But they moved out in 1992. That was really the only strange thing they reported having happened in the house. In 1992, a guy named Les Smith Jr. and his brother lived in the house, and nothing really happened with that. And then finally, later in 1992, in fact, in December of 1992, Debra and Tony Pickman moved in as the next house renters. Okay, and this is kind of where our story begins. The main story of the Sallie House revolves around the events that occurred in the 2 years that the Pickmans were living in this house. Okay.
So the fire was just a small fire. It didn't burn the whole house down. It just
It was just weird because they were like, no one knew like how it happened or what.
I'm going to ask this. I don't know if you saw it in your research.
Because I really focused on the Pickmans, not really the house.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you probably wouldn't know if I asked where the fire was.
No,
okay.
I don't know. Okay.
Well, if you guys know, write us at Conspeared@gmail.com. So.
Sure, for sure. All right, so picking up with Debra and Tony Pickman moving into the house. So they moved in December of 1992, and Debra at the time was pregnant, and they were expecting their first baby boy in June of 1993, which was the same year I was born. What up? This could have been me.
Shout out.
This could have been me. Okay. So Tony had come from a large and devout Catholic background, and he had always lived in the town of Atchinson, Kansas, and Debra was also Catholic, but she was from Buffalo, New York, and had only been living in Kansas for about 2 years before they were married. And from the outside, the Pickmans moved into a house that seemed small and unassuming, but once inside, it was rather spacious compared to the previous house they had rented. Now, I'm going to describe the house to you guys because obviously this is a podcast. We can't show you photos. It would be wise of you, as you're listening to this, to maybe Google a quick picture of the house. It'll just give you more perspective as we describe.
Don't do it if you're like me and
you're driving. No, yeah, not if you're driving. But
that's how I listen to my episodes of.
Well, every time I listen to a podcast, when someone's talking about something, like, oh my gosh, I want to see what this looks like right now. But it's always when I'm driving. So wait till you get to a safe stopping point and then look it up.
Please do.
Okay. But yeah, so for those of you that can't look right now, they had a front door that there was a small foyer with a coat closet directly across from the door. To the left, there was a staircase leading to the second floor. As you ascended the stairs, the first room to the left was what would soon become the baby's nursery. To the right was the full bathroom, and in the farthest back corner was another bedroom. To the right of the staircase and past the open banister was the front master bedroom.
Wait, where's the baby's bedroom?
On the second floor.
Second floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back at the front door and to the right was the living room with tall, slender windows. Off the living room and towards the back of the house was the dining room. It was an open floor plan between the two rooms. At the back of the house and to the left of the dining room was the large kitchen complete with a small pantry, the half bathroom, the basement door, tall cupboards, and the back door, which was flanked on either side by small, slender windows.
Isn't it kind of like weird to have, I mean, some of you out there might have this, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping on anybody's toes, but to have your baby in a bedroom upstairs, I mean, is this a baby like in a crib, is not crawling around.
This is going to be a newborn.
Newborn. Okay.
Yeah. The basement was another room in the house, and it was small with only one unfinished room. The forced air furnace, ductwork, water heater were the only things down there. Behind the furnace, however, was a gaping hole to another room about the same size. A tarp had lain across the opening of this hole, and the large stones that had created the walls between the two rooms. Beyond that, you could see large dirt mounds, and near the ceiling was the plumbing and electrical work for the upper floors. When the Pickmans moved into the house, there were no known stories about the house, no warning signs, and nothing seemingly out of the ordinary.
So there's a wall with a hole
Yes,
in it.
and that's significant later. But at the time, they were just like, okay, unfinished room.
That's kind of creepy.
Eerie. Yeah.
Why would you have a wall or a whole basement
And like a bunch
with
of
wall
dirt
in
mounds,
between?
like deliberately blocking it.
Okay.
So, all right. So some small but strange occurrences began to occur in the Pickman's household. So Debra Pickman, and by the way, some of these things I'll be reading will be in the first person point of view. And it's because a lot of the research I got from Debra Pickman's blog, where she was reflecting on some of these events. So some of these events you might see are explained in first person, which honestly is probably the best way to hear about it.
That's how I like to hear it.
So, Debra Pickman indicated that there were no strange things going on in the first few weeks. Or, if anything did occur, it was easily explained away, and it wasn't until later that the Pickmans actually began documenting things. So, the first strange thing we experienced, here's the first person beginning, was that our normally quiet and friendly dog barked fiercely at the threshold of the nursery. This subsided after about a week to 10 days. Our cats seemingly followed with their eyes something that often flew over our heads. We could never figure out what they found so captivating because we could never see what their eyes were frantically chasing. Much of the activity occurred sporadically over a period of weeks, however. Some of it was witnessed several times with any given day. This activity included many electrically based moments. Often, we would hear the timer on our microwave or the stove sound as if it had been set and just reached the end of its cycle. The Pickmans also documented how there were continual cold spots in the house, and how the lights would often dim as the two were sitting in the living room watching TV. Quick side note, these electrical problems and the light dimming, Deborah wrote that those were things that always happened. Like, some of these things were like, this only happened one time or whatever, but those things happened continuously. Like, TVs turning on and off, stereos vacuums coming on.
That's what I was going to say.
Lights dimming. That always happened. It's always
electrical things. You would think that after they had an electrical fire back in whatever year that was, that they would have got all the electric replaced, so that, you know, the wires replaced, so that way all this electrical stuff.
Well, it goes without saying that the Pickmans obviously called an electrician and he couldn't explain it. So, I mean, I'm just saying.
Supposedly, with the quote.
Well, that's what they said. Okay, she goes on to say that they also had problems with their portable phone. There were a few instances where I had not been able to use it when I was standing in the nursery.
Who was their service?
I don't know, this is a landline.
Oh, this is their landline.
I don't remember that long ago. However, upon exiting the hall, the party that I was speaking to returned. So basically, while she was in the nursery, she couldn't call anybody. There was other activity that took place in the nursery. While vacuuming the wind... I'm sorry.
They're vacuuming the wind?
While vacuuming... Oh, I'm sorry. While vacuuming, the wind-up musical above the crib, I guess, what do you call those things?
I used to know what those things were called.
Oh my gosh. You know what I'm talking about.
No, I know what you're talking about. You wind it up
it's
and
for the
it
babies.
dances around for the babies to stare at.
Forget.
It'll
come back to me later. But anyway, while vacuuming, it would wind itself up and begin to play music on its own.
So they would see it winding itself up.
No. She just said
she would just say that
she'd be vacuuming and then it would start going. But it was a wind up. So
right. I've actually seen those. my gosh, I wish I could remember what they're
I
called.
know.
It's driving me nuts. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. But I've seen them where you wind them up, and once they get so old, they'll play for a little while and kind of get stuck. The springs will get stuck, and then after the springs will just kind of loosen up, they'll start playing again. So that's a possibility for that one.
Electronic music toys would often take on a life of their own and emit sounds, hums, and even distant-sounding voices. I look back and wish I had known about EVP back then. This is Deborah.
EVP?
EVP.
Oh, EVP.
Electronic voice
EVP?
phenomenon. There were also other disconnection type occurrences with the phone that happened elsewhere in the house, and so frequently within one conversation that I had to cut my conversation short. This happened in good weather and bad, on local and long distance calls. The battery was fully charged, and at one point a new battery was installed, and when the occurrence continued, it gave us verification that the problem was not a faulty battery. Okay.
Interesting.
So those are some things that happened before their baby was born. Just the two of them in the house. But for some reason, things... Oh, I'm sorry.
Look at you moving too much.
But for some reason...
Wait, who's the podcaster that you always listen to that she kind of... or not podcaster, the vlogger. You were watching her earlier. She moves... She constantly...
Kendall Ray. She is
Kendall
a
Ray.
YouTuber and podcaster.
She, like, what is it? ADD?
Yeah, she's severely ADD.
Is it ADD or ADHD?
She's ADD.
Okay, so you're ADHD where you're just like constantly moving around.
Constantly moving. But when the baby came home and was born, activity significantly picked up. Okay. So when the Pickman's newborn son, Taylor, came home, he rarely slept through the night. And I know this probably to most of you doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary because a lot of babies don't sleep through the night. But the problem is that at night especially, it always seemed as if the baby was playing with something or someone. And as new parents, they didn't realize how out of the ordinary it was for a baby to wake up constantly and have no consistent sleeping whatsoever.
Okay,
so what they're
most
saying
of the
is
stuff didn't start until the baby got there.
Those things I talked about before, that happened before the baby, but things significantly were picking up when the baby came home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what if the baby... No, I'm not even going to go there.
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Okay, it's mobile or
mobile, yeah.
Mobile, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
That's what those things are called.
Thank you for that. So another occurrence that continued to occur throughout the entire time they lived there, I already said this, was electronics randomly coming on and off. And oftentimes it would happen when they were like just walking away. Like Deborah said one time she was vacuuming and she turned it off and she was walking up the stairs and the vacuum just turned right back on. Like almost as if it wanted to be heard. I don't know. At one point, Deborah spoke with her neighbors to the north. This part's really weird. At one point, Deborah was speaking with her neighbors to the north that lived in a red brick house, basically across the street from them. And they were kind of talking in the backyard, and Deborah said, I was shocked to learn that the light in the nursery could be seen by Carol and Dawn, that's the neighbors, at all.
Yeah, no,
at all hours of the night. And at one point, Carol said, why do you leave the light on in the baby's room all night long? Can the baby sleep that way? And obviously...
She was like, yeah, sure. Babies can sleep in the dark, the light.
And so she said, I explained that Taylor, the baby, had been sleeping in the cradle in our room and offered the idea that when they got up in the middle of the night, maybe the neighbors were seeing the light of the ceiling in the hallway. And the neighbors were like, no, it was definitely the nursery light that they had been seeing. And another odd thing, to me, that was really eerie. But something else that was odd...
Is this an every night occurrence? Did she say this was every night, or was this just like...
The neighbors made it out like it was every night. Like, why do you always leave...
you know how I am. I'm very analytical, so I'm trying to figure out how long did it take them before
was,
they finally said something to them. Like, why is the baby's
right? Because
light on?
it would have to be occurring more than one time for them to finally be like, why do you always leave the light on?
But how long did it take them before they? Was it a few days? Was like, hey,
I don't know.
I know you just got the baby home. Was it a week?
I don't know. But the thing is the baby wasn't even sleeping in the nursery. The baby was sleeping in their room.
Okay.
So, Another weird thing that was happening was that she said there was a few weeks where Tony and I would find strange mold on many odd things. Tupperware containers, dog food in the bowl that had been poured the same morning, and pots and pans and magnets on the refrigerators. They found mold on all of those things. Isn't that weird? That's weird. Can you imagine? Now listen.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to do this episode without being like total jerk about
all
this.
Right. But here's the thing. No, I'm going to say it one more time.
No, don't say it. You say it every episode.
I know, but I'm going to say it one more time so you can stop laughing so hard.
All right, guys. I'm going to keep laughing, but she's going to tell this.
I'm going to say it one more time. When you're laughing, you're acting as if you are more knowledgeable than every single person in the world. No, I'm saying that
when I laugh because this person could be making up a story.
Sure they could.
Dear David could have been making up that story.
Absolutely.
Most likely he was.
I even said that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But these people could be making it up too.
Sure they could, but there's a lot of evidence a lot of documented evidence for the things that have gone on. From them and from, who was it? A police officer?
The police officer that owned the place and rented it to him?
And neighbors who had no idea. People that lived in the house before and after them that didn't know them.
So the people before them...
I don't want to get into the people after them because they have their own little story. But,
right. But the people before them, what was happening with them?
The couple that had the daughter that talked to the little girl that had the imaginary friend. I'm just saying.
Right, no, I understand kids have imaginary friends.
That happen to have the same name as... I'm just saying, we're not there yet.
We'll get there, and yeah, I'll ask my question when it comes to that. But
and who identified the drawing.
I'm gonna laugh. I don't believe in the paranormal,
I understand you don't.
It's funny to me.
I understand you don't, but all I'm saying is that, like, you can't laugh as, like, this is just so preposterous. You can laugh for yourself and say this is preposterous to me.
Yes.
However, I really feel like you come off as, like...
You think it's condescending or something?
Really? Because,
you believe your way, I believe my way.
I'm just saying that, like, who are you... I say this every time. Who are you to say that it's not real?
It's just my opinion.
Sure. But, you can't, like... I don't laugh when you are saying this isn't real.
Yeah, because why would that be funny?
Because maybe I don't believe that it's not real.
If I said something... Say I told you that every time you turn around, when I come over here, every time you turn around, a demon is on my shoulder and he's biting my neck. But as soon as you turn back around, all the scratches and bites are gone and the demon disappears.
What are you asking me?
Would that be funny to you? Or
no, it wouldn't be funny to me.
Would you think that was real?
If you had significant evidence and
I'm just telling you this.
And I felt like you didn't have a reason to lie to me, then yeah, I'd believe you.
This is just me telling you how, what it is.
All I'm saying, bottom line, because we have the same argument every single time we do a paranormal episode.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
That's why I like true crime so much better, because you don't have anything to argue about it.
Exactly. But that's the way this was supposed to be. That's the way
Look, we took a Twitter poll, and more people are like me than you. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. But that's why I like to be who I am and you like to be...
That's fine. All I'm saying is don't laugh at me.
You can't get upset if I laugh. It's funny.
I'm saying it's disrespectful to...
It's not disrespectful. It's not... To me, it's just craziness.
To laugh at me and others.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the story.
Okay. But I believe it. So, in a sense... You're laughing at me too.
All right, then I'm laughing at you too.
Okay, but all I'm saying is, like, you have no proof that it's not real.
Yeah, but you have no proof that it is.
I don't. Which is why I'm not laughing at what you're saying.
But what I'm saying is you can believe your way, I can believe my way.
We can do it without laughing at each other too.
And I can laugh whenever I want to because it's funny.
But it's disrespectful.
Oh well, we gotta have thick skin. We can't be like these...
I'm just saying, it's hard to, like, talk about it when...
I'm interested in the story. You're telling the story. It's interesting. But I'm going to laugh. This is funny.
Okay, but all I'm saying is you're coming off as ignorant when you laugh. That's all I'm saying.
Do you use my, like, deep West Virginia accent so that way it'll sound better?
And I don't... And when I say ignorant, I don't mean uneducated or dumb. I mean ignorant to the fact of...
Ignorant of the paranormal and how EVP works.
How it could be legit. Because I don't know if this is real or not.
All right, here's what I would like to do. We have the whole summer off. We'll take some vacations, and we'll go spend the night at as many different haunted places as we can and see what happens.
We're going to be going to Charleston in a few weeks, and we're definitely going on...
Are we going to the cemetery, or are we going to...
Probably the cemetery.
All right, so we're going to spend the night in the cemetery.
We're not going to spend the night there.
We're going to spend the night in the cemetery.
We can go there at night if you want.
Yeah,
but
we're going to spend the night. We're going to get
whatever.
some...
Let's get back on this so we don't have this podcast running way later than we planned. All right.
You're the one who gets us off on these tangents.
Because you're frustrating to me. All right.
If you guys love the frustration in this podcast, or in this episode, please email us at conspeared@gmail.com. And
then I'll put up a Twitter. I'll put up a Twitter poll and to let Natalie host the paranormal episodes by herself.
They can ream me out and just be like, dude, why are you keep laughing at her? And then I'll read the emails and I'll apologize to everybody that emails.
Because you can rebut something without being like, oh, it's so fake.
I love that. That was good.
I mean, you can. Don't make me do it. Gerald, don't make me do it. You do it.
Oh, gosh.
Do it.
Do it. Hildor loves the podcast.
Oh, my God. We're so off topic. Okay. See, now I can't.
Let's see you get back on topic. See, if you had just ignored my laughing.
No, I have to address it.
Oh, gosh. This is too funny.
Okay. So the light on the nursery was coming on. The mold. We left off at the mold.
The mold. That's what got me laughing, because there was mold all... I poured dog food.
On dog food they poured that morning, mold appears.
Right.
That's weird.
That is extremely weird, because it takes a long time for mold to form. And especially on dry... Was it dry or wet dog food?
It doesn't say.
It doesn't say.
I would assume dry. It's very rare to see wet dog food.
Well, I'm talking about the kind that comes in the can.
Yeah, I know.
Plops right out. And that, be more of a chance to have mold on it if it was there, but it would take days.
So let's talk about one of the more bizarre incidents that happened in the house. And this was called the bear incident, as Debra Pickman called it. So, since the arrival of Taylor, their newborn son, he had been waking up every hour for every night for more than 2 weeks. So, Debra decided to call her sister Karen, and Karen offered to fly from New York to help assist with the baby. And so one day after Karen had arrived, the Pickman family and Karen went to Tony's parents' house to visit. And then they all came back to the house. And Tony went upstairs to use the restroom, only to make an odd discovery. When he came back down, he found Debra in the kitchen and asked why she had put all of Taylor's stuffed animals on the nursery floor. So she was very puzzled by the question. She said, she just looked at him strangely, and he asked again. And he said all of the stuffed animals were sitting on the floor in the middle of the middle of the nursery in a circle.
They were having a seance.
Apparently so. So Karen heard, and all three of them were just like absolutely stunned, and they walked upstairs to see for themselves. And as she was walking up the stairs, Debra talks about how she reflected and remembered how she exactly had organized all the stuffed animals in Taylor's nursery. So obviously it's not something she would have done. So they went to the nursery, and exactly as Tony had described, all the stuffed animals had been placed on the floor in the middle of the room. In addition, they had been neatly organized into a circle, their backs snuggled up against each other, facing forward. As she stared at this display, Debra got a really weird chill down her back. They were sure that someone had to be playing a trick on them. They rarely locked the front door. So Tony's brother Tom, or anyone else for that matter, could have gotten in the house and set this up. So what they were saying is they didn't really lock their door that often, so maybe a family friend could have come in and done this. That was like a joke or something.
That's something I would do.
But it's also important to note that Tony's sister-in-law, Jeannie, had been at the house earlier that day to drop off a high chair. And she had peeked at the nursery, but called the family and let them know that she did this. So when Debra called her to ask her if she saw the stuffed animals in a circle when she had been there, which was right before they came home, she denied it. So however this happened between the time Jeannie had been there versus the time the family came home. So the family obviously freaked out and fixed the stuffed animals again, and then turned out the nursery light, closed the door, and began walking down the stairs, only to look behind them and see the nursery light was turned back on. And so, obviously, they all ran back to the nursery together to see a single teddy bear lying in the middle of the floor, which they instantly put back where it was and went downstairs to talk about it and watch TV. Shortly after, Debra went upstairs to use the restroom and saw the teddy bear again in the floor. The family decided to sleep all in the same room that night, which, same, that would totally be me. And,
Because of the teddy bear?
And Karen flew back to New York the next day. Like, Team Karen right now, that would be me. Like, get the heck out. Additionally, the Pickmans decided to go stay at Tony's parents' house because they were obviously freaked out. And as they were packing up, Debra saw Tony in pain from something that was irritating him on his back. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's just a bug bite." But when they got to his parents' house, they lifted up his shirt, and it turned out to be 3 very long scratches on his back. And there's a picture. And there's a picture that goes along with that.
That's what I've learned from paranormal.
Right.
Anything in threes is to mock the Trinity.
It is. Yeah. So by this point, they're obviously freaked out. They know something's wrong. And given that they're both, actually, this is really strange that as they both come from a Catholic background, they would know to not invite a psychic into the house, but rather have their house cleansed by a priest. But for some reason, they invite a psychic into the house.
Wait a second. Okay, so instead of calling a priest to come over to clean their house,
they call a psychic.
They call a psychic.
Which does not go in line with their Catholic beliefs.
I'm sorry. I hear clean the house and I think of like Mary Maids or something like that.
So the couple invited Barbara Connor, a psychic, to their house after the previous incident. So although they were both hesitant to be conferring with a psychic, they were excited when she arrived. She was accompanied by her sister, who sat quietly for the majority of their hour-and-a-half visit. This is Debra talking, we all sat on or near the couch in the living room. Barbara spoke of a little girl she was able to pick up on and found it easy to communicate with her. She told us that she liked to be called Sallie. It should be noted at this point that we use the spelling of Sallie, S-A-L-L-Y, as an assumed spelling. This spelling is used in all early references, such as the portrait Tony drew of Sallie in October of 1993. It has since come to our attention that this spirit may be older than was originally assumed, and that the spelling would be S-A-L-L-I-E, Sallie. This is the spelling that has taken the forefront in all the subsequent references.
So how did they get to this assumption?
Because back in that time...
No. How did they find out that the little girl is older?
We're going to go on and talk about it.
Oh, it's later in the story. Okay.
This was also the first time that we began to document anything we thought might be related to the activity or haunting of this house. We had invited a few people as, quote, witnesses to join the interview and borrowed an Instamatic camera for the evening. And obviously, if you go onto YouTube or even the Sallie House website, you can see these pictures and videos from this, I don't know, what do you call this? Meeting with the psychic, seance, whatever. Tony's brothers... Huh?
Was it a seance they had?
I don't really know if this would qualify as a seance.
Yeah, if it was just a cleansing, then they just went in.
They're communicating with it. So I don't know
they're communicating.
Yeah.
With it. Okay. Sorry, I got lost on that one.
Tony's brothers ran the video camera so we could refer back to what had been documented on it. Photos were taken with a 35mm and Instamatic Polaroid camera. Speaking with the, quote, child spirit, Barbara often sat quietly and with her eyes closed in an attempt to tap into the energy of the spirit, or spirits, of the house. Sometimes she stood up and walked around to get a better sense of things. She told us many things about a little girl spirit who eventually became known worldwide as Sallie. We originally spelled her name as... Yeah, okay. We already talked about that. So it was later changed. Barbara reported that Sallie was a 7-year-old girl who had discomfort in her abdomen, a pain in her hand, and a toothache. I was also told that I did a lot of things that, quote, bugged Sallie, that she thought I was too bossy and she didn't like it. She said I had too many rules and I can't remember them all, was what Sallie told us.
Okay, so is this...
This is
How is she
Sallie
telling her?
speaking through the psychic.
To the psychic.
To the
okay.
Pickmans,
Gotcha.
correct. Since the day the bear spun around in the living room, I had begun addressing what we considered to be her negative behavior. Scratching Tony and waking the baby continuously through the night had been a big concern. Barbara was reassuring and told me that every child needs discipline, even young ghostly children. She suggested that when we went about the house, we occasionally remind Sallie of the rules, just as we would do with any other child. She said, be patient, but firm with her. It was a strange thought for me to walk around the house addressing the behavior of a 7-year-old ghost girl when I had no experience with one. Knowing Tony, it was even less likely that he would do this. Up to this point, Tony and I had often doubted claims of extraordinary paranormal activity and that of psychic abilities. We both felt that the majority of psychics were secretly led in their discovery of information by the actions, responses, and surroundings of those they were reading.
So they didn't believe in the psychic, but
Right.
they called him over there to help him out.
Exactly. Very strange.
That's,
So they were both skeptical of
it's a little
psychics.
questionable.
For this reason, Tony and I tried to say as little as possible about what was going on during our interview. Instead, we sat quietly, taking it all in, and then responded to the information offered. Tony remains reserved in his assessment of Barbara and the information she shared with us. We talked about many things, and there had been several questions asked. The suggestion was made that if we gave Sallie a few items of her very own, she may leave Taylor and our things alone. We agreed and asked if Sallie would like a doll of her own. In an almost disheartened voice, Barbara, reiterating Sallie's responses, said, well, all right. So they're offering to give Sallie, like...
Oh gosh, this is going to be another Annabelle.
That's really like a replica.
There you go. Would you like this doll to live in?
So after Barbara's visit. So no outstanding occurrences happened following Barbara's visit, other than things became normal for them. And they began to, do what Barbara said, like remind Sallie of the rules, and they gave her some things of her own.
They should have just wrote all the rules down and put them up on the refrigerator or something so Sallie could keep track of them.
Electronics kept turning on and off. That was still something that always occurred.
Was that a rule? Was she breaking the rule of don't turn on the electronic devices?
I don't know. Candles were lit, and occasionally Sallie would write notes with crayon that Debra left out for her to draw
That's right.
with.
You were telling me about that. That's funny.
As far as Tony was concerned, on October 31st of 1993, it was a morning just like every other morning. He had worked the third shift and got up at 7 a.m. He had gotten home and gone into the kitchen to get something to drink before taking a few minutes to unwind. Unfortunately, things changed very quickly. He got a glass from the cupboard and turned around to see a little girl standing across the kitchen just beyond the woodblock in the center of the room. His first thought was, who is this child and why is she in my kitchen? A split second later, the realization kicked in. The clothes in which she was dressed were not of 1993. He dropped the glass, which had been in his hand, and it shattered to the floor. He looked down when he heard the noise, and when he looked up, she was gone. In answering a multitude of questions to Debra, Tony went on to describe what he saw. He said, she looked just as real as you and I, innocent looking and sweet. She had a surprised look on her face, as if she was just as curious. She wasn't scary looking at all. He had it in his mind that if he ever saw a ghost, it would be creepy looking and scary. She had short brown hair with a bow that sat on top of her head, a round face, and big eyes. She was in a fancy dress of lace, which made it apparent that she was well-to-do, or at least well taken care of. When asked how tall she was, Tony said he wasn't really sure. About my chest height, Tony's about 5'5", but I couldn't see if her feet were on the floor. He went on to say that she didn't say anything or do anything. She just stood there staring at him. When the glass broke that he was holding, she must have disappeared when he looked down at it, because she was gone when he looked up. There was no sign at all that she had been there. After talking about his experience, he returned to the kitchen to clean up the glass and returned about 20 minutes later with a piece of paper. He handed it to me and said, "This is what I saw." And this is where he had sketched out a picture of Sallie. At this point, Tony and Debra decided the apparition he saw must have been the little girl, the spirit that the psychic had picked up on, and so the name Sallie was written on the drawing. Although the Pickmans continued to experience the typical occurrences in that house, the final straw was a second attack on Tony, which led the family to ultimately leave the house with a resolve that this Sallie spirit was not as good as it was presenting itself to be. After the Pickmans moved out, and I should just stop and say, the Pickmans experienced a lot more, but I really had to kind of look through it all and decide what was more significant that happened.
Right, there'd be too much information.
And I think you were reading something a little more about the second attack on Tony. Can you?
That was in 2007. They revisited the
I'm
house.
sorry. So that was afterward. Let me have you talk about that after then.
Okay.
But yeah, whatever spirit this was didn't like Tony. I also read somewhere that later on they had an occurrence with the psychic where they were saying that Sallie's mom was also haunting the house, and that Sallie's mom, Sallie said, was angry and didn't like people living in the house. And
see, I didn't read that part.
Yeah, that was something later on talked about, but there wasn't as much detail about that. So the final straw was the second attack on Tony, which obviously that was one of the rules. Don't attack people, don't hurt people. And obviously
she broke the rule. They kick her out.
They left.
Packed her bags.
They left shortly after Taylor's first birthday. And during Taylor's first birthday, their baby boy, they had recorded supposed EVP sessions where they could hear Sallie saying, "I want that," and "Happy birthday, birthday boy," and things like that.
That's my favorite toy.
Anyway, so after they left in 1994, a family called the Liggett family moved in after the Pickmans and explained that they had discovered in that room that we were just talking about in the basement that was kind of covered up, in that room they discovered a pentagram along with some other disturbing items that kind of seemed like they would belong to like Satan worshipers kind of things.
All right, here's my question on that. When we were watching BuzzFeed, the floor was just a bunch of black marks all over it.
Well, it had been painted, but it almost looked like it had been covered up.
Right.
But you could still see it.
So did they do that?
I don't know who tried to cover it up. I don't know. I'm just wondering. It was discovered when the Liggett family moved in.
Did they discover the black marks, or did they assume it was a pentagram?
No, they saw. I don't know. They just saw a pentagram, and they saw the other stuff too. And actually, a worker.
Wait. So the people that lived before them, the ones that went through all the Tony
didn't see any of that.
Didn't even
Not
go
from
into
what
that
I read.
section?
Not from what I read.
Well, I would assume they would have said something about it if they saw it.
Yeah. But the Liggett family had a daughter. They had a son and a daughter. But the daughter would later, because when people asked the Liggets about anything weird happening, they mentioned the pentagram, but they said, no, nothing weird has happened. Like, they were just, like, people wanted to come in the house after the Pickmans, and, like, paranormal investigators wanted to come in, and they were, like, not about that. They were like, there's nothing going on in this house. There's no paranormal things. Leave us alone. So after they moved out, their daughter,
Stayed there?
No, but she was telling people there were weird things happening to us in this house. Nothing physical, but she said that one time she woke up, she was sleeping on the couch, and she woke up with like a face staring at her. Like she's laying down horizontally. It was laying at her the same way and staring at her.
I agree
like a
with
gaunt-looking face.
With Shane on BuzzFeed how that was probably like sleep paralysis, and she's probably just...
It's a possibility.
Or night terrors.
But since the Liggett family moved out, I'm trying to see what year they moved out, because I think that's kind of pertinent. The Liggett family, 2001.
Oh, one.
And since 2000, I think there were some renovations going on between 2001 and 2004. But they say from 2004 to present day, no one has resided in the house. And it's mostly used for like ghost tours and...
you can actually stay in the house.
You can stay there
overnight for $400.
Yeah, for like $400. But they also have tours that are not as expensive where you can just like take a tour of the house and like not stay there. But obviously we watched BuzzFeed Unsolved and they stayed there overnight. They didn't actually, they left before.
Yeah, he was like, at the witching hour's at 3 and for 3 minutes, you know,
and
that's
other
when
people,
most things are supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm. Other people have documented like crazy things that have happened when they visited the house. I know that on BuzzFeed Unsolved, if you haven't watched them, go watch them. They're awesome. But they had like a flashlight and they were saying like, if you're in here, Sally, whatever, turn on the flashlight. And the flashlight turned on not once, but twice.
5 times.
5?
Yeah, he said at the end of the show, he was like 5 times.
I'm proud of you for being honest about that because it would have been so easy for you to be like, yeah, it was only 2 times.
Yeah, but I could still say, see, the way the paranormal guy did it is he turns the knob on the end of the flashlight so
But because it takes so much energy to turn something on.
But how much energy does it take to turn on a television?
What do you mean?
Well, you said the lights are coming on, the television's coming on, all the electronics. So I would think if they have enough power to turn on all these electronic devices, that little tiny flashlight, they just barely need to turn it. And it comes with a spring inside of it. So, I mean...
It's weird. We saw that happen. There's like video evidence.
Oh, yes, I see that. But I'm just saying that the flashlight thing, to me, it could have just been the spring inside of it, and he barely had it. And you saw it flickering. And whenever we used to go camping when I was a teenager, you could barely turn it on, and it would flicker and everything.
So, I mean, to kind of conclude most of this, like...
Do you want to hear this 2007 attacking?
No. Oh, yeah, go ahead with that.
All right, so in 2007, they decided to...
The Pickmans, can I just interrupt you for just 1 second?
That's who it is, the Pickmans.
I know. But the Pickmans, I should say that since they moved out, they haven't forgotten the house. And if anything, they're even more invested in figuring out what was going on with that house.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In 2007, they decided to let some kind of paranormal investigators into the house. While they were in there, Tony was said to have been picked up and thrown against a door and held there until they said something like to the effect of his wife said, "In the name of God, release him," or something like that, and then he dropped to the floor. But whenever he was thrown against the door, he was thrown out of his boots. And there's a conflict between, yes, she says that it's hard to remember back that far, but whether he got thrown out of 2 boots or 1. My thing is that whether he got thrown out of 1 boot or 2, how does your foot come out of a boot that's tied all the way up? They said it was a work boot that's like, not a low shoe, like a tennis shoe, but a boot. And so unless your boot is filled with grease or you're really super sweaty, or I just don't see how his feet are going to fly. Maybe one demon held onto the boot while the other demon pushed him against the wall.
All I know is that when it comes to things like that, crazy things happen. And so I feel like pretty much if it wanted to, any kind of evil entity like that could make anything
So they can pretty much do anything.
Pretty much, I would think.
Demons are like God.
No.
If they can do anything.
According to like Catholic faith and religion, no man is stronger than the devil except God.
And no man is stronger than God.
No,
but God.
God is...
Oh, you said no to that?
No, listen. Can you listen to what I'm saying? No man is, according to many Catholic priests, no man is stronger than the devil. Well, actually, Warren said that. I think that's what I said in the Annabelle episode.
Yeah, sorry, I don't trust the Warrens. You heard the
whatever
the Annabelle episode.
I'm not even going there. I think you're not very educated on the Warrens. You've read like 2 websites and think you know everything.
I'm not saying that.
But all I'm saying is that I'm not gonna say that like you're having trouble understanding it because of our physical world the rules of our physical scientific world. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, you can't do that with untying her shoes, but like, you don't know what kind of like powers go on in that kind of
Can you
realm.
explain it to me?
I can't explain it to you because I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like.
I'm just giving you what my thoughts are.
I understand. I figured you'd be interested in this website though, but like, in conclusion, I guess with some of this is like, could the Pickmans have been making a lot of this up? Possibly. One thing I wanted to mention, I forgot. So Tony drew that picture of Sallie after he saw her. We talked about that. So there was that little girl some years back who had that imaginary friend that called Sallie. Well, the Pickmans, if somehow or some way, showed this picture to that girl, and they didn't prompt her by saying, "Is this Sallie, your friend?"
You knew what I was going to ask.
I know, yeah. They said, "Have you ever seen this person before?" And she said, "That was my imaginary friend from that house."
Okay, but the pictures you showed me earlier, there was 2 of them.
There were 2 of them.
Who drew one?
Okay, so Tony drew one, the one that looked more like a baby.
Yeah.
Tony drew that one. And the other one, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe was sketched by an artist from the description of the girl who had the imaginary friend. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so they had them side by side being like, this looks pretty similar.
Right. Yeah, they're saying that it looks similar, but one of them looks like a
One
young
of them,
child of
one
2,
of them looks
and
like
the
a
other one
4-year-old.
looks like a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it's kind of...
So
go check out the pictures.
maybe the demon or ghost or whatever was a baby for the girl.
No.
And why not?
Well, yeah, that's true.
I was going to say, you said anything's possible. Look
Sorry,
at you.
I'm getting
You really
excited.
can't hold anything.
This is the worst. I've been awful.
You guys, this is what I love about this podcast. I can get her so worked up that she's over here like knocking the microphone off into the floor, into her lab. It's a wonder the iPad hasn't flown across the...
Whatever. Let me get into this because you'll love this.
I know you're into this. I love it.
Like I said, the Pickmans could have made all this up, but I feel like where there's unrelated cases, the family that moved in after them, the Pickmans, the family that lived before them, all did not know each other and all were telling similar occurrences. And even the family that lived after them were like, no, nothing strange is going on here, blah, blah, blah.
Right. No, what I'm saying, when you said that, I was like, okay, the parents said there was nothing going on. But the girl, she could have been either seeking attention or having some kind of psychological
The parents did admit
breakdown.
to finding the pentagram.
Well, yes. Finding a pentagram is normal. Back in the...
That's normal. Every day. It happens every day.
Back in the 90s, I don't know what it was about the 80s and 90s, people started getting into like devil worshipping.
Creepy.
And like, I think it was part of like the music culture or something like that. Like, a lot of Ozzy Osbourne going on here, you know, like...
Creepy.
Highway to Hell, stuff like that, AC/DC. But, so, that wouldn't be something that you couldn't find. Yes, I would believe they could have found a pentagram in the basement. I mean, no big deal.
Let me just go ahead and say this, though. There is a Kansas paranormal group that, obviously, they're from Kansas, so they have a lot of time to invest in this house and discovering what's true and what's not. And so this is what they have to say. And of course, as always, we're leaving it up to you as the listeners. We have our own opinions as well, but I figured just to be fair, I would throw in some things that they have to say that are a little more skeptical about this.
Okay, cool.
All right, so these are the facts of the house that they agree this is true. The Sallie story has yet to be proven. Even a portion of the story cannot be verified by any public documents at this time. The Sallie that was identified by sightings and many others was Sallie Isabel Hall. Unfortunately, though Sallie Hall died in 1905, she was not a little white girl, as both drawings depicted. Mrs. Hall was married for 16 years, and during those 16 years, she gave birth to 14 children. Only 2 of her children outlived Sallie, and a third child, Claudine, lived only 2 months past her mother's death. Sallie Hall's grave is unmarked, another reason why many have been misled. The photo in the gallery is from Oak Hall Cemetery, and the 2 little white flags are the only way we found Sallie's grave. The caretaker kindly marked the grave that Sallie and her daughter Claudine share. They ask, was there a child named Sallie that died in the house? Honestly, we don't know. As of right now, our research has yet to turn up a child named Sallie that died in that house in any year. Yes, several people have died in that house, and yes, it has been documented. The full history of the house is still not completely known. From the year about 1871, the year that the house was built, up until 1939, we have a good idea of who lived and died in that house. And then they kind of go into, like, the history of it, of, like, who lived there and whatever, and who actually
Talk about
died
all the people
there.
that you had on your list earlier.
But what they're saying is, like, the spirit, this little girl's spirit, where some people are saying, oh, yeah, there was a little girl that died there. That's not true, based on what they're saying.
Right, from there.
Yeah.
What is the BuzzFeed say that it was the 34-year-old?
They said that there was...
Black woman.
Right, that's who they're talking about
Yes.
right here. She was an African-American woman named Sallie Hall. But to me, this doesn't really say anything, because I would not need proof of if like I saw a ghost, I wouldn't need proof of someone who looks like that living and dying in there, because if it's of a demonic nature, it can appear as anything to you that it wants.
They could have been a snowbird. They could have been a ghost from Canada that just comes down to South Carolina.
And as we've said before,
vacation.
Oftentimes those kinds of entities will take hold or appear as something innocent and something trustworthy to kind of gain entryway into your life, into your house.
Scary.
Stop! You scared me. Oh my gosh.
In case you didn't know what that was, I was on my phone just finding my Halloween theme. And it scared her. Like, she literally jumped.
I hate you.
I know.
But there's a lot more to know about the Sallie House. If you want to learn more, definitely go to the website. I mean, there's just, like, everything we've talked about is documented. You can look at all the pictures. You can look
definitely check out it is an interesting story. That's the whole reason I'm into this paranormal stuff, is because it is interesting. Just because I don't believe in it doesn't mean that I don't think that it's interesting.
It's definitely something I would want to go see for myself.
Yes, I would love to spend the night.
And honestly, if you live in Kansas, that's definitely worth a trip, I would say. Like, for us, like, the only logical thing would be to fly out there, but I wouldn't waste a whole trip going.
No, I would say
going to Atchinson,
there has
Kansas.
To be hauntings here in South Carolina. I'm sure.
But if you're someone listening to the podcast that lives there, maybe you never even heard of the Sallie House and you live there, go there, check it out.
And spend the night.
Let us know.
And let me know if anything crazy happens.
A lot of people on the reviews will say, oh, nothing happened. But, like, you can't go into haunted houses expecting something to happen. Like,
it's just a
think
house.
about all the people who lived in that house where nothing happened. And it just so happened that the Pickmans were the ones who experienced something the most out of everybody. And yes, they could have been making it up, but because of all their documented evidence, I'm just more so leaning to the fact of that they weren't making a lot of it up. I don't know.
Y'all know how I stand.
Y'all.
Hey, us West Virginians, we talk like them, all right? Keep your South Carolina to yourself.
Okay. But as always, we're going to leave it up to you guys as listeners. What do you think? Is this a pile of BS, as Gerald would have you believe? Or after doing more of your own research, is there some merit to what happened to this family?
Yes. We want to know.
I definitely want to know.
Just email us at Conspeared@gmail.com.
Conspeared@gmail.com.
Spelled just like you see it on the
If you've ever had an experience here, if you've heard of this and you've experienced something, I would love to know.
Oh, gosh.
There's a lot of people that write in on the website that say
you're
that they
answering
visited.
all those emails. If
Absolutely.
people start writing in saying, I was in my living room and my teacup flew across the room, I'm not going to answer because people are just going to get upset with me. I have to hold my tongue at work when people say something about a paranormal thing happening. I'm like, oh, interesting. Yes.
You're annoying.
And then I walk out.
Okay, so good news though. I feel like we can go ahead and announce this because we already said that we're going to do one more either conspiracy or paranormal before we do another true crime. So I wanted to kind of go ahead and get them ready.
Make the announcement.
Yeah, because I love true crime, so I'm so pumped. And it seems like you guys love the true crime.
Yeah, true crime is more popular on here than paranormal conspiracy.
So, next week, I'm excited to announce we will be beginning to talk about the case of Jodi and Arias.
That's going to be very interesting.
Really intense.
And be prepared for, just like Casey Anthony, it's going to be 3 episodes.
It's going to be really in-depth because
you know how she is.
If you listen to Casey Anthony, I'll just go ahead and say, this is my second favorite murder trial. If that tells you anything.
Oh, yes. Believe me, I know.
I'm going to know everything.
I have people on Twitter sending me messages saying how in-depth, like, they listened to, what was the one you liked?
I tried to be different.
True Crime Garage.
I tried to be different.
And they said, yeah, just as in-depth. And
I tried to be, that's where we cover the more popular cases. I'm like, well, if we're going to do it, we need to do it a little different. And, we need to go a little more in-depth. Which is what I can promise for the Jodi Arias case as well.
I don't want to know anything about the case. Like, you know me, I'm not true crime. I don't sit around watching true crime all the time.
Mm-hmm. Like
not
me.
all the time, but, a lot of the time, like you. But I want you to just get all the evidence. I want to sit there like I'm in the jury,
Yeah.
And I'll put my 2 cents in, but at the end, I'll give my idea. Just like Stephen Avery, I gave my thoughts.
Yep.
Casey Anthony, gave my thoughts. That's what I'm going to do the same.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you listening to us.
Please go to iTunes. Give us a review, please.
Please give us a review. They help us a lot. We love reading and getting your feedback.
Oh, yeah. I love reading. What is it? 10 out of the first 30. We'll just write them down, draw them out, and give out a shout out to whoever it is, whatever the review said.
Yeah. Also, one thing I've been interested in doing in the future is collaborations. We've already had a couple podcasts reach out to us about wanting to have us come on their show.
Yeah, I'm always iffy about that because it's okay whenever I talk to you about things and I can say, because I like watching you get upset.
It's fine to bully you about your beliefs, but I don't want to bully anybody else.
I don't know. After all this is done, we smile at each other and we say, that was a great that was a great episode.
I've had a couple people also approach me about wanting to come on our podcast as guests as well, because they say that they've had paranormal experiences and things like that they want a platform to talk about those things on. So I told them possibly in the future it could be an option.
Yeah, I think they wanted to do it in July, actually.
No, there was someone who messaged me
somebody else.
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So.
We'll give a couple of shout outs. I've been listening to some episodes lately, and I try to mention the ones that I have been listening to.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a chance, check out Zing This. That's a great podcast. Into the Portal. Obviously, Glenn Thinks Stuff, because, I mentioned him in the last...
Glenn's great.
Yeah, Glenn is hilarious. I mean, if you like that kind of humor, then you're going to love him. But... do you have any that you've been listening to lately? I stick with my... what is that?
I have my favorites. Mile Higher. I listen to them every week.
Nothing. Or what is it called?
True Crime Garage. Always. My 2 number ones are True Crime Garage and Mile Higher.
One that I've really been getting to that's new and you can catch up real quick is called Nothing But a Bob Thing, and it's all about Bob Ross. Like they start on the first episode and just talk about the paintings. I did listen to
a clip of it. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, that was great. That's every time it comes out, I've got to subscribe, ding, let me know when it comes out. I thought there was one more. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll get them next time.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, I can't express to you how grateful I am that the podcast has done as well as it has, and that you continue coming back each week for our new episodes. It's kind of startling, actually. Yeah. That
I thought it was gonna be like
that people want to listen to you.
Yeah, I've had friends. Gerald. Yeah, they want to listen to me. I think they're listening to you.
They might. I don't know. People in real life tell me they like the way I tell stories, so I was like...
Well, that's the whole reason. You are the main host. Whenever I did that bonus episode, I was like, okay, Natalie's usually here to lead it, and I just give my 2 cents in. And whenever I did it by myself... I was stuck for like the first 15 minutes.
This is the way I see it. This is when I first was like, okay, I really need to do something with this. When you have a room full of 5th graders say, no one tells a story like you. You're the best at reading stories. They always tell me that. And I assume some of it's probably from my background of theater and,
they're sucking up.
And they're sucking up probably too, yeah. All right, guys. Well, let's end this before we get off on too much of a ramble.
Yes.
Be sure to tune in next week when we're going to be talking about the case of Jodi and Arias.
Yes.
Part 1.
And thanks for listening to